all technology, all media specifically, that we create, we change it, we evolve it, but it also simultaneously changes us and evolves us. I bet you spend at least 4 to 5 hours a day, if not more, on each of those platforms. What did you get in exchange for that? What did you get in exchange? Your time was stolen. It was taken from you, it was hijacked, and you willingly gave it up. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's what we have to be honest about and say. We can live in a world where technology serves us, but for the most part, we are serving it. And we have to do better for the sake of all of us, for the sake of our mental health, for the sake of our economies, for the sake of our political structures that we're engaged in. We have to do better than that. If we don't have boundaries with our phones, we won't have boundaries in our relationships. If we can't focus while on digital platforms, we're going to struggle to be productive in our work and off screens. If we use our free time for scrolling, clicking, and being entertained, we're going to miss out on the deep satisfaction from our hobbies and nature and life and relationships.
Who are you and why are you here? Are we gonna live life in fear, or are we gonna stand up and make sure we're heard? Are we gonna hide or live life by our word? With integrity we can be all that we can see in our mind's eye until we're finally free. We can become whatever we choose once we know the choice lies within me and you. Now's the time to wake up. No time for playing small. With a painful history and an uncertain future, now is the time to evolve.
Hello? Hello? Come on, man. Hello and welcome to the Unapologetically Human podcast. I'm your host, Dan Boyman. Thank you for tuning in. That voice that you just heard was Bob Hutchins, co-author of a new book that just came out last October, 2022, called Our Digital Soul: Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Toward Recovery. Hey, can you be quiet? Go. Sorry about that. My dog is laying directly behind me, licking herself, distracting me. Anyway, as I was saying, Bob is a digital marketing executive with a master's degree in behavior and organizational psychology, and his co-author of the book is Jenny Black, a licensed marriage and family therapist. I was fortunate to have a really great conversation with Bob recently about the release of the book, and I'm excited to share it with you. Our Digital Soul is essentially about how we are addicted to our phones, social media, and technology, and how being connected in the ways that we are, and some of the dynamics that are going on with the media that we're taking in every day, media that we're being bombarded with, is causing us a lot of problems, to say the least. It's traumatizing us in a lot of ways. It is driving a lot of the fear and division that we're seeing in our society in so many ways. And this book is a attempt to lay out what those problems are, and takes a addiction framework essentially to lay out a pathway toward recovery. Bob mentioned that it's a pro-human approach to guide you through the overwhelming maze of modern life to the life that you, or that we, really want. These topics are really near and dear to my heart, and a lot of the personal experiences that I've had. I've been really interested in politics and social issues, and really using my phone, my computer, social media to learn about and share about all of the things that I'm both concerned about going on in the world, and also all the things that I'm interested in. And we all know that these devices that we carry around with us are incredibly powerful machines that can hardly be accurately called phones anymore, as the phones themselves, along with the software on the phones, the social media companies, the tech giants, they're all set up and incentivized to essentially hijack our brains, to manipulate us, to maximize the time that we spend on our phones, on our computers, and on these platforms, and to maximize engagement. And it's unfortunate, and it really may not be at all the intention, but the algorithms that have been sort of driving this maximization of engagement have also figured out, similar to legacy news media organizations, that if it bleeds, it leads. And it's the things that outrage us the most and make us the most afraid that actually garner that engagement. And this has been something that I've really struggled with personally for many years. Back in 2018, I did some mental health and addiction programs through the Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Toronto, CAMH. And I already knew at that time that my use of my phone and my computer, and being essentially kind of glued in a very addictive way to these platforms, was something that was detrimental to my kind of like getting anything else I want and need to do in my life done, because I'm always on my fucking phone. So one of the programs that I did was a group therapy program that was for behavioral addictions. So typically this program is what gamblers would have historically taken, and the majority of people that were in the group alongside myself and others were gamblers, because behavioral addictions are all working on the same mechanisms and pathways, essentially hijacking our reward mechanisms in our brain. And I went into that group for what I termed to be tech addiction. And so I was actually the only person. This was a once a week group therapy where we learned about, addiction and the things that were going on inside our brain and how to think about them and how to challenge them and how to work to change the behaviors that were, causing us negative consequences in our life. And there was a few people that were there for gaming addiction, playing way too many video games, but the majority of them were gamblers. And yeah, I found it really interesting that the framework that they have taken with this book, Our Digital Soul, is in that framework of addiction and recovery. But yeah, it was a really interesting conversation that I had with Bob. And I just want to read you one of the in the beginning of the book where it has praise from others. There's a guy, Jeff Goins, the best-selling author of The Art of Work, and what he had to say about the book was: the battle between soul and technology continues, and it seems that our soul is losing. This book explains why, what's at stake, and what we must do to live as whole humans, fully alive. Our future depends on us getting this and taking action. And well, I guess this is me taking action. Look at me go. All right, well, let's get to the episode. Without further ado, I give you my conversation with Bob Hutchins, co-author of Our Digital Soul. And I just want to give a shout out. A friend of mine, Susie, said that she was interested in this conversation. So, Susie, if you're listening, just want to say what's up. Thanks so much. Here we go. All right. So it's just going to be the two of us, obviously. Jenny's not.
Yeah, Jenny had a doctor's appointment today, so she couldn't make it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for reaching out and setting up the call. I'm really interested in learning more about you and your book, and it's a really interesting set of topics, really relatable for people, for sure, for me. So yeah, we can kind of just jump right into it. Let me just make sure I don't have any issues here. I think I'm good. Yeah, so I obviously I haven't had a chance to read the whole book, but I've kind of perused through it, and it seems like the subject matter is really, really important for a lot of the things that we have going on these days. And so yeah, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your co-author and kind of how the book came to be, and then you can get into kind of a bit of the problem that you guys see and the solutions.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So my background and my history is in actually digital marketing and internet strategy, advertising. I ran a successful agency here in Nashville for about 17 years. and I still consult and I speak and strategize around a lot of the technology and digital transformation, marketing, et cetera.
Mm.
One of the things that I noticed over the past 20 years, because I was in really early into internet marketing and strategy, and um, was that any type of advertising or marketing you do, you become a behavioral psychologist on behalf of your client.
Right.
In other words, you're trying to figure out, your client's coming to you and say, I need you as the expert to figure out how to get my customers, my supporters, whatever it is, to act differently because they're not doing what I need them to do.
Hmm.
And so it might be buy something, it might be donate, it might be give up their, information for leads, whatever it may be.
Right.
And so I found that I recognized that early on. And so I began to just continue to educate myself about psychology of colors and images and words. And, this is nothing new. People have been talking about
Hmm.
this from the Mad Men era. But one thing I started to see was this thread of, I got a hold of writers like Marshall McLuhan, who was a media theorist back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
And he said this. He said, all technology, all media specifically, that we create, we change it, we evolve it, but it also simultaneously changes us and evolves us.
Hmm.
And I found that interesting, and I kept that in the back of my head. And as I continue to go through my career, and in my own life, my family life, my kids, I began to see that there was a change in the way that we concentrated. There was a way that we related to other human beings. Social media came on the scene that opened up a whole nother can of worms. Um, all of a sudden, there's a sharp rise in anxiety and all these things that the digital world has given us so much positive, but simultaneously, there's the other side of the coin too. So
Hmm.
about 2.5 years ago, I started going back and getting my master's degree in behavioral and organizational psychology. Around the same time, I met Jenny Black, who's the co-author of my book. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she was starting to talk about this. We started to compare notes, and we're kind of like the yin and the yang. Is I'm in the digital world, have written books that are pro digital, and then she's on the other side going, I'm getting the fallout of all the stuff that you're doing.
Right.
um, and so, I'm always counterintuitive. I'm always kind of contrarian, and I can play both sides of that fence because I think it's really important to be honest and have these
Hmm.
conversations that if I'm going to be in this industry, I need to push toward more human, more toward human flourishing and the things that I do on behalf of my clients and for myself. And so
Hmm.
that's the genesis of the book and where it came from.
Cool, cool. Well, it's really interesting. I went to school for graphic design and I also did some political activism. So I got training in some of the things that you're talking about as well, as far as yeah, it's just interesting to think because I think, the average person doesn't tend to think about that. Well, everything that we see affects us. Like everything, colors have, implications for how they affect us psychologically. It's like everyone knows red is used to represent anger and danger, and blue is used to represent sadness, whereas yellow might be used to represent happiness or cowardice or whatever. And typography has all these effects on us. A diamond retailer, jewelry retailer doesn't use the same kind of fonts as like an auto garage uses. And so there's all these really subtle things that are taking place on top
Exactly.
of all of the strategies that are being used to market to your customers and all sorts of stuff. And then also the McLuhan with sort of like political organization and things like that. So it's really interesting because I one thing that I see about the book that I like is that it seems to be painting this really big picture about a lot of the kind of issues that are happening in a lot of different spaces in our society. And of course the use and overuse of our phones, and the diminishing attention span that people have and things like that. And then of course the political conflicts and
Yeah.
all the controversies going on. It's kind of all wrapped up in to this conversation that the book is about, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we called it our digital soul. We didn't say your digital soul, we said our digital soul. And
mhm,
what that really implies is that we are kind of all part of this symbiotic nervous system, i.e., the internet and screen life, that we're all
mhm,
interdependent on each other, and it controls the way that we engage, think about others, ourselves, and the way that we see the world now.
mhm,
That's We're all part of it, and so it really is this kind of awareness of a digital soul that we all tie into. Because let's face it, for most of us, it is the number one relationship and the most important relationship that we have, and
mhm.
and to illustrate that, I say, what do you feel like if you go out for the day and you know you're going to be away for 3 or 4 hours, and you realize that you're 30 minutes down the road and you left your phone? Um, it's like, oh my God, like that
Like
makes your heart
panic,
skip a
like,
beat
oh
just
no,
hearing about that, right?
how am I going to survive the next 3 hours without my phone?
Yeah, but we don't think twice if we go, oh, it's been 30 minutes and I told my significant other that I'd call them 20 minutes ago. We're like, oh, okay, well, I know that feels a little cynical, a little sarcastic, but here's another illustration. In the world of addiction, and psychologists and addiction recovery specialists will tell you this,
Mhm,
that one of the ways that they work with addicts to determine and to define if you are addicted to a substance or whatever addiction it might be
yeah.
and they've been saying this for years, is what is the first thing that you think about when you open your eyes in the morning? And for most of us, it's we roll over and pick up our phone.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, nor am I qualified to say that we're all addicted, but I'll just leave it at that and say that it is our most important relationship.
Right.
And so I don't think it's too far-reaching to say, that's kind of again the source of our digital soul and where that came from.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I've got my phone here. I use it as my alarm, so it's sitting beside my bed, and I tend to I try to not go on it, like onto social media when I first wake up. But yeah, totally guilty. And I'm qualified to say that if not most of us, many of us, myself included, are addicted to these. They're the technology themselves, as well as the software, as far as social media and stuff like that. We know from you know a lot of different research, but even more mainstream things like the Social Dilemma documentary from Tristan Harris on
Yep.
Netflix, that even the people who help to make these devices and the platforms that we use, they used them to make them addictive on purpose, because that's how their business models operate. And so there's a lot of problems with that. But yeah, it's a really interesting framework. I'm really looking forward to kind of you outlining kind of like the problem scape and
Yeah.
the solution and the path to recovery, because this is really personal for me, because I have a long family history of bipolar and
Mm.
alcoholics. And I think that it's nice to be able to have conversations like this, and for you guys to have this larger framework where it's like it's kind of like this: what do humans need to be well, and what are we reaching for in order to do that, which is what we tend to do for all of the variety of addictions that we reach for, to self-soothe and comfort. And like, what are the problems that cause for us as individuals and as a society? and that it's an addiction framework and a path to recovery sort of framework
Absolutely.
is really interesting. So yeah, why don't you tell me a bit more just about the kind of problem that you guys outline in the
Yeah.
book and the pathway to recovery?
Yeah, sure. Referenced Jenny Black. She's my co-author, and as a LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, she said about 2 years ago, and even more now, she said, Bob, it used to be that when people came into my office and we were in a session, that the phone and screen life, whatever that meant in context of a marriage or a kids, parents, young adolescents, their own personal struggles, it was always an issue and part of a bigger issue.
Mm.
She said that has shifted. She said, in my work and in my colleagues' work, it is no longer an issue. It is the number one issue. Almost every single person that comes through the doors without a difference is there's some sort of connection, addiction, problem, struggle that centers around this digital soul, this screen life that we're in 8-10 hours a day. And
Mm.
it could be, marital problems, lack of communication, people, affairs being started from, meeting people online. It could be kids coming in with high anxiety and depressive thoughts because of comparison of, a huge diet of TikTok or Instagram. It could be,
Mhm.
boomers that said, I don't have a relationship with my kids anymore. And the kids going, yeah, because you're sitting there scrolling news all the time and you've turned into this monster. It doesn't, it hit all ages, right?
Mhm.
So, I say all those things and I can, to the person listening, it's like, yeah, another naysayer, tech person. And the book was not written to be anti-tech, anti-screens, anti-social media. It's not the purpose of the book. The
Mhm.
book is very pro-human, right? So let's talk about how digital screen life, all of this, it's not going away.
No.
And like I said, it's my career. So I'm all about it. However, we have to also be honest and say, like you said earlier, we are the product. We have to acknowledge that. Like,
Mhm.
your time is being stolen and hijacked. None of these companies, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, whether it's TikTok, you could go down the list. They make money one way: by your attention,
Mhm.
by your eyeballs, because then they sell that time to advertisers that says, we have X amount of people that are on looking at our screens on our platforms. We will sell you advertisements. So it's to
Mhm.
their advantage of hijacking your attention. One of the exercises I do is, I like to do this when I go and speak to schools or colleges, and I'll say, um, think about your favorite platform: Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I want you to think back over the last 2 or 3 days, and I want you to tell me three three posts and the details of those posts. And I rarely ever get a response. And they're like, oh, I can't think of any. Oh, maybe this one was kind of funny, but they can't give me a context. They can't give me
Mhm.
details. And so I said, I bet you spend at least 4 to 5 hours a day, if not more, on each of those platforms. What did you get in exchange for that? What did you
Mhm.
get in exchange? Your time was stolen. It was taken from you, it was hijacked, and you willingly gave it up. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's what we have to be honest about and say. We can live in a world where technology serves us, but for the most part, we are serving it. And we
Mhm.
have to do better for the sake of all of us, for the sake of our mental health, for the sake of our economies, for the sake of our political structures that we're engaged in. We have to do better than that. And so the
Mhm.
book is really talking and laying some of those things out. It's looking at a lot of different studies and research that has been done, and then coming to a conclusion that, okay, this is not just our opinion. We cite the experts. We talk about recent studies, and then toward the end of the book, we talk about some real practical ways to move forward, so that we can recover and that we can live in harmony with this technology, not it totally consuming us and changing us and evolving us into the worst version of ourselves.
Mhm. And as far as the kind of some of the research and the studies go, is there anything that kind of stands out to you that you like to
Yeah.
talk about as far as some of the most interesting stuff you've come across?
Yeah, the subtitle of the book is Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Toward Recovery. So
Mhm.
Jenny really, I think she was one of the first ones to really coin the phrase media trauma. And
Mhm.
all of us think of the word trauma, and I know it's overused now, and it's very popular in society.
Mhm.
But in a nutshell, you could define trauma as when we are placed in stressful or difficult situations, and that's not the trauma, that's the event. The trauma is how
Yeah.
our body responds, that says we don't have the emotional capability to deal with this situation. And so
Mhm.
therefore our physiological coping mechanisms kick in, and we find ourselves reacting in ways after the event is over, sometimes weeks, months, years, that we can't no longer control. And so,
Mhm.
um, and one study specifically, you mentioned studies that haunts me to this day, and I use it all the time. There was a study done. Do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing a few years back? It was probably back
Yeah.
2013, 2014. At the
Yeah.
end of the Boston Marathon, somebody actually blew up a bomb, and they caught the person. It was a chase that lasted, I don't know, a day or two. Anyway, within just a couple of months, 2, 3 months after that, there was a study that was done of a couple thousand people, and they split them in half, and half of the people were actually present at the event, witnessed
Mhm.
it, were there in the midst of it. The other half were people who consumed it online on media. And the purpose of the study was to um, measure the effects, long-term, short-term effects of the stress and
Mhm.
the you could say trauma on
Right.
individuals. And what they found was the people who viewed it on media and on screens were more affected than the people who were actually there.
That's
And
crazy.
it is crazy. And you say,
Totally crazy.
you go, oh, that's how is that even true? Well,
Yeah,
here's
like how is that possible? Like the people who watched it on social media and online were quote unquote traumatized worse than the people who experienced this horrific thing in real life. That's
yeah,
wild.
yeah. And here's the science behind it. When you are go through something stressful, when you are traumatized, whatever it may be, and you see this in animals who are out in the wild. You can see it on documentaries. The lions chasing a gazelle. Somehow the gazelle gets away. It goes and hides under a tree, and it shakes, and it moves its legs like it's running in place. And after a few minutes, it gets up and it saunters away.
Mhm.
That is a very simple illustration of the parasympathetic, the nervous system and the brain in
Yeah.
mammals to work those stressful situations out. Because as Western Americans, as Western first world people, we think, oh, everything is right up here in our brain and it's in our eyes and I can process it and that's all there is. Well, it's not. We have a whole nervous system,
Mhm.
a body. And so when you're there physically at the event, i.e. the bombing, your fight or flight, your whatever kicks in, and you're able to respond in the way of some people running and screaming, some people hiding under a table, some people calling 911, some people going to the aid of the people that are injured and actually helping them.
Mhm.
And that's the body getting out and processing it. But when we don't have those opportunities and we
Yeah.
then view the same event from many different angles repeatedly, our brain does not know that it's not necessarily actually happening.
Yeah.
What we do is we go, here's what we do. Oh my gosh, that's awful. Swipe. Oh my gosh, that's awful. Swipe.
Again and again and
And
again.
again and again and again, and our bodies is just craving to go, oh wait a second, I've got to process this, and we never
Mhm.
get the opportunity. Now just multiply that time a bazillion.
A million,
Yeah,
a million
every
different
single day.
traumas, a million different horrific things we see online every day, or might come
Yeah,
across
and then
every
we
day.
wonder why I can't sleep, or I'm
Yeah, I'm
depressed,
just
or
not feeling great these
yeah.
days. Did you see these 10 horrible things that happened this past like 2 days?
And it doesn't have to be like horrendous. It can
Yeah.
be things like we won't even talk about the dopamine and all the positive stuff, but
Hmm.
let's say you've just gone through a bad breakup, or you just got divorced, or whatever it may be, and all of a sudden you get a healthy dose of 3 hours swiping through Instagram, seeing your friends and contacts putting their best foot forward and going, I have a great relationship. Look at me, how successful
Yeah.
I am. Look at my successful marriage, or whatever it may be. That's equally disturbing to our nervous systems as well.
Hmm.
Um, so those are the kind of things we talk about when we talk about media trauma. And we talk about some of the studies that are out there that are starting to look at this. I just heard today, then I think it was just released, that Instagram has a do not disturb, do not turn off notifications thing
Yeah.
that you can actually turn, like a do not disturb button like you have on your iPhone. They have it for the app itself,
Yeah.
which I think they're starting to get a lot of pushback from regulatory and other people like us who are saying, you've got to do better, because this is having an effect not only on young people but all people. So it's a baby step in the right direction, but this is the world we live in.
Yeah, yeah, it's deep, it's heavy, and it seems I like to, well, eh, I'm in it just like everyone else.
Sure.
I use my phone too much. I have a wide variety of complicated things going on in my life. I'm going through a breakup right now myself,
Mm.
and it's whether you're going through a breakup or whatever it is that might be happening, whatever might be stressing you out, leading you to maybe lean on checking your phone and checking the notifications and getting the dopamine hit. And that's how I communicate with a lot of my friends and families, through the various like conversations on apps and stuff like that. It just seems like it's the easy thing to do. It's so easy to just pick up your phone, and how many people have had the experience where maybe you go to check an email for something very specific, or you go on Instagram to like message your friend about something specific, and then you find an hour later you get off of it and you're like, shit, I didn't even do the thing that I was like supposed to do. So it's like it's the easy thing to compulsively do that gives us some upside, right? Like you were saying, like
That's
there
right.
obviously are positive benefits and soothing and things like that. But like with any addiction, it really the problem manifests itself in the negative consequences for interacting with behaviors or substance use or whatever it might be, and not being able to stop doing that despite knowing that there are these negative consequences. So
Yeah, and on the positive, even on the positive comments, I mean, the illustration that I always talk about is, imagine you go outside and you go for a walk down the street in your neighborhood or wherever you are, and there is a line of people on the sidewalk or whatever it may be, and every 10 seconds, they're patting you on the back going, good job. You look amazing. Oh, great. Oh, man, you're the best. Oh, wow. You look hot today. You would go,
You're like, I'm gonna go walk by that line again.
yeah, you would go, if that was my life and everywhere I went, that's what people said to me, you'd go, that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And yet that's not sustainable. But yet we do that for hours and hours a day. We get addicted to that like positive patting on the back. And that's equally not healthy for us, just like the negative things. But that's not how life is. We don't get that in real life. And I understand there's a time and a place for that. And that social engagement, using emojis is a way to show emotion and engage in a more human way. But we've got to do better. And we've got to get back to the deep core of who we really are as human and get back in touch with that. Because that's the only thing that's going to allow us to move forward in positive ways.
So what is the path to recovery? How do we start to do that as individuals more and more collectively?
I think we have to stop viewing, and this is a big one for me, and we're going to have to go a little deep here, but we have to stop viewing this as simply a tool. I think that's a cop-out. I think it is
It's so much more than that.
Yes.
So
it is an extension of who we are, right?
Yeah.
All technology are extensions of our bodies, of our souls, so for instance, I use the example, McLuhan talked about this, other people have talked about this, but when somebody invented the wheel, it was an extension of the foot, of the legs, right? Somebody goes, I can use this wheel to create a cart to move and leverage and move things further. I can then use it to make a cart that a horse can pull so I can travel further. It then evolved into automobiles, right?
Yeah.
So these inventions and these technologies, you can't just say they're tools. They're actually extensions of our bodies, so that these things that we create change us physiologically and physically. So the human being of today, who, as a result of the invention of the wheel and the car and all that, we now have suburbs that we can live miles and miles outside of the city. We don't have to walk where we go. We don't have to, we have much shorter time spans of how long it takes to get places. We can go and explore other places. That's a very different human being than the human being of 1,000 years ago who had to physically walk everywhere they went. You could argue that you could say that, well, it's really not a natural position to sit behind a wheel of a car with your legs up, one pushing, one element, the other, driving a wheel. That's not a normal human physiological way to sit for hours at a time. Yeah. But we do it, we've adapted to it, and it has changed us, and for so many positive ways. But also, you could say we're probably not as healthy. We can't walk for 25 miles a day like maybe our ancestors could. And so all of that to say, that's a simple example of saying we can't just say it's a tool. And so we have to get to that point. And then we have to say, okay, I can go with you that far. But if we're going to change, we also have to say, if we don't have boundaries with our phones, we won't have boundaries in our relationships. If we can't focus while on digital platforms, we're going to struggle to be productive in our work and off screens. If we use our free time for scrolling, clicking, and being entertained, we're going to miss out on the deep satisfaction from our hobbies and nature and life and relationships. And so it goes to that old saying, is how you do anything is how you do everything. The same is true of our digital life. And so I think that awareness, that acknowledgement is the first step. And then the second step, and we lay several of them out in the book, is here's a simple thing that anyone can do that will help them to get an awareness and get back your attention and maybe some of your brain space. Practice being bored. We've lost that ability, so many of us. Next time you're in line getting coffee at a coffee shop, or you're waiting at the DMV or something, anytime you have to wait, look around, and it's amazing how uncomfortable we've become with just standing and looking around and doing
well,
that.
that's when we have the urge to pull
Exactly.
our phone out. Any second of waiting in a line or anything like that, where we'd be like, oh, I could do something on my phone. You have that urge to. I catch myself, and I do try to have the awareness to be like, oh, I'm having the urge because I have to wait in a grocery store line for 30 seconds to pull my phone out and check my messages or go on Instagram or something, and to fight that, to have the awareness to be like, no, just be in this tiny little moment without this. It's essentially like a crutch of some sort to not be bored or feel uncomfortable feelings or be with ourselves. And
and the importance of boredom is this: it's when your brain uses that time to recharge. It also uses that time to solve problems in your subconscious. It also uses that time, your brain uses that time for creativity. And so what you may feel is wasted, boring time is a part of being human that's extremely necessary. And without it, we reach that cognitive load, and we limit our creativity. We limit our problem solving because we never give our brains a chance to
break.
just a break. Just be bored. Just like, hey, brain, chill and do whatever you want to do in the background and recharge yourself. And so I would encourage everyone just to try that for a week. Just try. Now, you're going to feel weird because you're going to be the only one looking around while everyone else is on their phone. And another practical way along the same lines is, next time you're with someone having coffee or a dinner, or you're connecting with them, it's going to pop up pretty soon where they're going to go, oh, can I just take this? I need to respond to this text. Don't pull out your phone as well. That's the reflex, right? Like, that's what it's that boredom, or it's a socially acceptable thing to, okay, now I have to do it as well. Don't do it. Resist those things that we've trained ourselves to do that really aren't really healthy. And the beautiful thing about all of this is our brains have plasticity, and we can change. We can heal from this. We're not stuck in this, and this is not something that can't be fixed. Any of us at any time can change these behaviors and habits. Jenny, my co-author, I mentioned her. She went on a fast for like 35 days with no phone. And then she only uses a phone that has text and phone calls. That's another extreme. Even me saying that gives people the sweats, I'm sure, that are hearing this. But it kind of goes to the point as well.
I was listening to a podcast the other day. I forget what it was, but they were talking about how, because one of the I think one of the like pull quotes from looking through the PDF of the book says something about how, like, no one needs to see the data. Everyone knows that media, and our smartphones in particular, and social media and stuff like that, are harming us. Like, everyone has some personal understanding of that. And so people are, even some of the people that have helped to build some of these technologies have realized that it's, the iPhone came out in like 2007, 2008. So we really are only 15 years into this technology. And, as so many things with humans go, it goes, here's this new thing, here's the amazing problems it solves. and then it's a bit further down the road where we're like, oh, here's all the problems, new problems it's creating. And then we have the overcorrections and the, you know, luckily there are people trying to address these problems like yourself, authors, some technologists who help build the technology, like Tristan Harris, and people creating foundations for trying to address some of these problems. But yeah, this podcast I listened to the other day was talking about how there's even like, I think it might be like a group of kids in like New York or something who have sort of there's been some stories on them or something because they've all decided like these smartphones are like, I actually, because of how addictive I know that this is for me, like I actually did a behavioral addiction program as an outpatient with CAMH. I'm in Toronto, and CAMH is our mental health organization, and I went to them because I was struggling with a bunch of stuff a few years ago. But I had realized that in like a clinical sense, this is a problem. How much time I'm spending on my phone is keeping me from my hobbies and working on things outside of my regular job and work life chores and relationships, that it's like it's holding me back in my life and it's causing me a lot of problems, right? So I look at this and I go like this, you know, like you're saying, it being an extension of us. Like I look at my phone as being an external hard drive of myself, of my brain. It's like it holds so much information for me that I know I don't have to remember because I have access to it. And that feeling of almost like anxiety that comes up, or even like a twinge of like panic if I leave my house, which I don't, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I'll realize halfway up to work that, oh shit, I forgot my phone at home. And then it's almost like this small feeling of dread almost. And it's because it's like, it's not just my phone, it's actually a part of myself, and it's my ability to communicate with my friends and family, or just know what's going on. Or I might, you know, have a bunch of messages come in that I don't get to read until I get home, and I can't even let anyone know, like, hey, if you're trying to get a hold of me, I forgot my phone at home or whatever, right? But
it's your digital soul.
Yeah, it really is. And I look at it also, the sheer level of addictive potential and that I struggle with on a very real kind of sense. I look at it as being like, it is an amazingly powerful tool, but it's also an incredibly dangerous temptation for the negative repercussions that it can have. But anyway, the group of kids, I think they're saying in like New York, I guess, have realized something sort of similar, where they're like, these are actually too much for us to handle in some way, and we don't want and we don't need to have this device on us. And even that we call them phones is still kind of silly. It's like, right. It makes sense because of they were phones when they were just text and audio, and then suddenly it's like, no, these are supercomputers that every single one of us has in our pocket. They essentially are making us like walking cyborgs with access to all of humanity's recorded history pretty much for free. You know, it's like, it's more powerful than the president of the United States had up until recent history, you know. And so these kids, I guess, have decided that they're all going to just get flip phones, and they're going to like meet at the park once a week to have like a book club or something. And the person on the podcast that I was listening to was like, yo, these kids sound cool, man. Like, I think I need to get myself into like a park book club or something. Like,
yeah, it's amazing. I tell people all the time, I have a lot of hope and faith in the next generation, because I do think there's a difference in the generations, that between digital natives, you know, Gen Z and younger, and then millennials and Gen X and boomers, it affects us all. Mm-hmm. But we all came in at different times of that development. And so therefore we bring our experiences and our way of seeing the world into those contexts.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important to understand that. But I believe that the digital natives have an advantage to go, um, you know, there's a different way out there, and because it is their native language, they can say, we understand it, we understand the nuances, we understand what the power of it, but we also can easily see where it's lacking and affecting us. Whereas, for instance, one of the biggest concerns that I have in a lot of the studies that I'm seeing now is in the boomer generation, the olders, 60 and up. They're really struggling. I don't know if you've noticed, but next time you're out, if you see an older couple at a restaurant or walking down the street, most of the time they're sitting there on their phones, not even
Mhm.
talking to one another. And they'll do that for hours and hours. And maybe it's because they got in late and they're just trying to catch up. But I also think too, it's partly because of growing up in an era where to some degree you trusted media, you didn't question, you only had a few, you had Walter Cronkite and a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
stations. And so therefore you just translate that training of your brain and culture into the phone, and you have to go, hey mom, what you just sent me, that's not true, that's fake. They're believing, they're engaging, they're getting agitated by news things, and they're just getting sucked into it. So it's really important, I think, generationally, and we lay that out in our book too, like to understand what's going on in the minds of different generations. So I
Right.
think that's an important fact too. But I have faith in the next generation. I believe they're going to lead the way in it and hopefully solve this. But it might be painful getting there.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. It seems like everything we do is quite painful in one way or another, especially
Exactly.
these days with how just how divided and well, I mean, the world is changing in just so many drastic ways, not just with technology and um, you know, different political controversies and whatnot, but it's like we have the destabilization of globalism and a return to great global power wars and stuff like that. Like it really is a lot
It
to
is.
try to wrap our heads around. And yeah, when you when you said that you have faith in the newer generation, I felt like I kind of was like laughing a bit because I feel like I think I would say probably rightly so for certain reasons, the young Gen Z, as they're termed, the younger generation after millennials, they get sort of shit on a lot
Right. Absolutely.
because well, it's almost like what's coming to mind kind of right now is almost like it's like you think of someone like Justin Bieber. It's like this was a kid who got world famous and then grew up in the like spotlight in a way that is like just like on steroids compared to anything in previous generations. And now it's kind of like, well, that's kind of what everyone is going through now. And so it's like it's so easy to see the mistakes and the problems and the fuck ups and to shit on this new
Right.
generation as being this, weak snowflake who needs safe spaces for everything and trigger warnings and all this stuff. But so it seems like you're in a minority sharing that you have faith in them, but I think that's probably a pretty healthy place to stand because
Well,
one,
I
we can't
think,
be.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
go
like
go
you
on.
said with the article and the podcast that you heard about these kids. I'm hearing that too. You don't, it doesn't get the publicity because it's positive news, but
Yeah.
and I have a Gen Z myself. I have a millennial, one right in the middle, and then I have one that's 16. And he definitely seems to be, and his friends, a lot more self-aware than even my millennial kids, because
Yeah.
um again, it's the native side of it. It's almost like if you were born in another country, and your native language was of that country, but your siblings and everybody around you was their second language, you
Right.
would understand the nuances and the meanings behind, and actually have a deeper context, because you didn't have to translate everything in your head from one
Yeah.
language to another. I think that could be what's going on, because I'm immersed in digital life, and I have been for a long time as a Gen Xer. But my Gen Z, you'll say, "Hey, Dad, did you see that?" And I'm like, "I don't get it." And he's like, "Well, it means this meme actually means this because it means this because it means this," and that's very native to them, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely the ones that are coming up that want something different, that are, they already have a social awareness and they want to push for social good.
Mhm.
Sure, they have their faults, like all of us have and did and do, but I do think that I have faith. We're pretty resilient as human beings.
Yeah.
um, I just wrote an article on AI, and how we view, where our views of AI come from.
Mhm.
And I think we have to be careful that in the West, we've had a healthy dose of dystopian science fiction for about 100 years.
Yeah.
But if you see some of the studies coming out of the East, specifically Eastern Asia, um, they believe, and they have a much more affinity toward technology and artificial intelligence, because their culture, their lore, their movies always portrayed robots and computers as helpers and as friends.
Yeah.
And so I'm always trying to check myself to go, is this really just culture and media that I'm influenced by, or is this actually what's going on? And so if we can parse those things, and when we think about, the future media. But I'm also reminded of the E.O. Wilson quote. He was a famous biologist who said, the problem with humanity is we have Paleolithic brains or emotions,
Yeah.
medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Yeah.
Tristan Harris uses that a lot too.
Mhm.
And the point is, our technology is always going to be way ahead, and it's only going to get farther separated light years from our physiological brains. I mean, let's be honest, we have the
Mhm.
same brains and emotions than we did 10,000 years ago. We might know a little more,
Yeah.
but we respond the same way. Our physiological fight or flight, parasympathetic nervous system, wants, desires, and needs for love, safety, all of those haven't changed.
Yeah.
And so we can't cram our brains into um, you know, our technology that many times is way out in front of us. So we just got to figure out, how do we do that dance, and how do we allow it to serve us rather than us serve it?
Yeah, that quote actually reminds me. There's a rap group that I like called Bliss and Esso, and it's an
Mm.
American rapper and an Australian rapper, and they have like an old school DJ. And one of the lyrics that I really like from one of their songs says that we exist in a bizarre combination of Stone Age emotions, medieval beliefs, and godlike technology many people can reach. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's
they stole that from E.O. Wilson, I think.
yeah, and it's, well, actually one of my mentors years ago who he he was part of an organization I did some like leadership programs through, and then I ended up doing some meditation programs of his that he had developed, and he talked about that, how like we're also, every type of human being that has ever existed, we're all on earth together right now. Like we still have indigenous tribes that are like uncontacted in the Amazon
Yep.
rainforest and elsewhere, and obviously there's few of those, but then we have like people that are still farming like we did 10,000 years ago, and then we have, these urbanization into major city centers and these like major cities that never existed before in the way that they do now, and then these like technological people and biohackers, and it's like every kind of human that has ever existed are currently on the planet right now together. So it's almost like we have Stone Age and Bronze Age and
Yep.
new technological age, humans all living together. And yeah, it's just it's a lot, man. It seems like the problems are so complex and so overwhelming that like I constantly am. I deliver groceries for an organic food company here in Toronto, and so I listen to podcasts all day basically, and I'm always trying to understand. I say my podcast, Unapologetically Human, is about trying to understand myself, other people, in this crazy modern world that we're living in, and it just seems like the sheer amount of problems that we have and amazing technological advancements and the myriad solutions we're finding to so many of our greatest challenges and stuff is all happening at once. And it's kind of like I do find it really kind of pertinent and relatable how you guys are talking about in the book that this is also traumatizing us as well. Right. It's like I feel like I have the luxury to some degree to be able to listen to podcasts while I'm working, and I'm learning about things that I'm interested in, and I'm trying to understand myself more and my own psychology and the challenges I'm trying to overcome and what really is like happening in the world with all these complex challenges, and just feeling so overwhelmed. So I feel for the new generation, like you're saying as well, having no context other than this is the world.
Right.
Like, this is the world now. And I do find it to be somewhat hopeful as well, like you're saying, because it helps to have, like a 16-year-old kid. And I have a few nephews that are between kind of like 16 and 20 as well. And just knowing that, well, this generation is coming of age. And so they're becoming adults. They're deciding, what problems they want to focus on, working on, finding solutions towards. And there's going to, like we always do as humans, because we are resilient and we're versatile, they're going to come up with novel new technologies and solutions to actually fight and combat the problems that are arising from what our generation has
absolutely
created, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important to remember that every generation, I believe, has something to learn from the previous, the one older, and the one coming up. And if we can always remember that, I think I try to practice that, is like, what can I learn from my kids? And then what can they learn from me? And then what can I learn from generations older? Because I think it's human nature that every generation from the beginning of time falls into, well, back in my day, it's like we romanticize that it was somehow better. And it's quite possible that some things were, but when we were young, like the time right now, these are the good old days to somebody, right? To my kids, this is going to be the good old days. And then when I was back there, my parents were going, well, back in my day. So, it's just this ongoing, never ending wheel of life. And so I think if we can remember that and go, okay, I remember my parents, and now I look back and I'm like, I learned so much, but I also learned some things that I'm glad we don't do as human beings anymore. Yeah. And if we can always keep that mindset at all throughout our whole lifespan of going, they're going to do things better. And they might get some things wrong, and hopefully they'll learn some things from us, but also they're going to be sitting in this podcast or whatever version of it is 20 years from now or whenever, going, I'm really glad we don't do the things the way that we used to do anymore. I think it's better. It's more human now. It's better for us psychologically. So that's the hope I have. I think what our jobs are now, I asked Jenny when we first started writing this book, I'll give you one more thing.
Mm.
I said, and I don't know what made me ask her this, but I said, Jenny, if I was an alien, I'm sorry, no, flip it. If you were an alien and you still had your psychological training about human beings, but somehow you were an alien and you hadn't been in this world, or maybe you were frozen in time and came forward, and you were to look around and see what was going on in the world with all screen life, but you didn't know anything about it. All you did was see the people, how they were acting, what they were dealing with. And you didn't know about screen life. You didn't know about social media, but you just fell on this earth. What would you say is going on? Like, how would you observe that? Like, what would be your, she thought for a moment and she said, I would say that these people have been bullied and abused.
Mm.
She says, because that's the type of thing I see in my office, is people coming in acting like they've been traumatized and abused and bullied, but there's no instance of abuse. There's no instance of being bullied.
Right.
That's what's going on, I think.
It's like no specific event.
Exactly.
It's just like the being steeped in the environment.
Yeah, 10, 15 years ago, if someone came in with the same feeling, you would go, okay, what happened to you?
Mm.
But now it's not what happened to you. It's this heavy dose of living in a reality that's an alternate reality, that we're getting this done.
It never
to us.
stops.
It never
It's like
stops.
there's no specific incident, because it's, to some degree, it's, we're just being bombarded all day, every day, with all of the biggest controversies and tragedies in the world. And that obviously there's like a massive issue with, even traditional, quote unquote, traditional media before, the internet, TV and newspapers and stuff. This business model where it bleeds, it leads. It's like we're constantly being fed all the worst news of what's happening in the world and whatnot, So
I think if we
yeah.
can take that mindset, to go, okay, I'm going to control my own life. I'm going to be bored. I'm not going to pull up my phone. I'm not going to allow, I'm going to set boundaries, just like I do in my real life. I'm going to set that in my digital life too, and say, you can't have my attention today. You're not going to hijack, my hours today. And that's a battle for all of us. But luckily, there are more tools out there. Before I started this podcast, I put on the focus setting on my iPhone. And I'm learning how to do that more and more throughout the day, to get things done, to not be distracted and pulled away. And I think we all have to make those decisions individually, what works for us.
For sure. Well, here, I'm guessing our time is coming up. You got to get going, or
Oh, whatever. If you have any more questions, let's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully we'll continue to see, people working on solutions to these problems. And I find it to be challenging, because it seems like the things that we need to change have to happen on the scale of the individual first before they can happen on larger scales.
Mhm.
And they tend to almost like this idea that nothing's ever good enough, or nothing's ever fast enough as far as we want it to. So it's I think going to be a lot more incremental than we might hope, but that we do see more and more of a move towards, recognizing the challenges that we're faced with these new technologies and whatnot. And
yeah, you mentioned Tristan Harris, and I
Mhm.
also listen and follow him as well. And he's mentioned this, and I would agree with him. To your point of what you just said, we have responded to issues like this in the past, like the tobacco industry, like pharmaceuticals, that we're still dealing with, where it was a huge industry that made money, arguably nefariously or maybe ignorantly, off of people and using people ultimately that harmed them in ways, for instance, tobacco industry that literally causes cancer and kills people. In the format of pharmaceuticals, the same thing. It kills people, harms them, creates addictions. But we had to get to the point where we said, okay, we're going to create some real serious laws and regulations. We're not going to take away people's ability to smoke. You can go smoke all you want, but here's the guidelines. You can't advertise it to kids. It's illegal.
You can't lie that it's not addictive.
You can't lie that it's not addictive.
To Congress.
You have to make it very clear in all your packaging that that it causes cancer. You can't do it inside of a public area, but you can go outside or in your house or on your porch and smoke all you want.
Yeah, you can't advertise anymore. You can't even have the packages visible anymore, which is probably something we're going to see happening around alcohol and stuff as well as we go forward, or hopefully we do, because
I think so.
Yeah, I think we will. And
around social media and screen life. That's my point is I don't know if that'll happen in the next couple of years, the next 10 years, 20 years. But I think we've got to, that's a controversial, especially here in the States with their individual liberties. People will push back many times and say, well, what are you saying, Bob? You're saying you want the government to get involved with free speech and social media? Well, what I'm saying is we know it's killing people. Literally, we know it's harming people and killing people. We know when we figured out that was happening with tobacco and pharmaceuticals and seat belts in cars, and shall I go on?
Yeah.
We created regulations that saved people's lives. Now, are we going to do that with these things that we know? We have the studies. We know the effects. We know it anecdotally. All of us know it. Depression, suicide is at an all-time high. I'm not saying it's all social media and screen life, but I'm saying there's some really, really, really strong studies and connections out there.
Yeah.
And not to mention the Facebook files that they tried to hide, where they themselves internally brought in psychologists to study the effects of it, and then it was leaked. I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, what was her name?
Frances Haugen.
Frances, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that's one of the challenges too. It's like the Panama Papers. It's like these things come out, and then us actually I guess the lag between our ability to determine that something is in fact a massive problem, and here's like the problem landscape, and then finding solutions, coming up with solutions, and then the further actually being able to implement them, especially when it takes a lot of behavioral change on the individual level. It's challenging, but I too am looking with some optimism that we're gonna, as rocky as it might seem it is right now, and as rocky as it's gonna probably continue to be. They say things tend to have to get much worse before they get better.
Absolutely. Any new technology. I mean, I'm sure when the automobile hit the roads, there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
Well, it's the same as even the printing press apparently caused a lot of the same problems that we're seeing now with the lack of gatekeeping from larger media organizations, institutions like newspapers and television networks. It's like this is not the first time we've been through this, and it's not probably going to be the last. And we are capable of, and we have a good track record, fairly great track record of finding ways through it and making corrections and coming up with new technologies and new ways of interacting with them and with each other, and that we're gonna get through this. And I think that's something that that's a message that people definitely need. So I really appreciate people like you taking the time and the energy, the effort to actually look at a problem, find solutions, make a book about it, and to have conversations like this to hopefully not just inform people to have some hope for the future, because there is a way forward, but to actually be on kind of the front lines I guess that's kind of what I'm saying too, about how like it always seems like it's slower, the changes, because it really is in the creating of books and the having of conversations that, you know, kind of goes through our society. It goes through people. Like we're this networked organism, basically, right? So
That's right.
I appreciate you and your book and the conversation and what you're
Thank you.
doing.
Thanks for having
And
me.
yeah, could you, if you have anywhere, where can people find more about the book, buy the book, what's your website,
Yeah.
social media, anything like
Yeah,
that?
it's the book is called Our Digital Soul. You can get it on Amazon. You can also go to ourdigitalsoul.com. I've got a little landing page set up there where you can, sign up for our email list or order the book. You can follow me. I'm Bob Hutchins on Twitter, BW Hutchins on Instagram, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn writing a lot of articles and content there. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, please do. I encourage everybody to get the book, read it, leave a nice review. That really helps to get the word out. We're self-published on our own little label. So we don't have the big budgets to get the word out. So anything you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated.
Cool, man. Well, I'm happy. I'm really honored to be able to have a
Thank you.
platform where I can invite people on and have conversations like this. And I really appreciate you reaching out and that we were able to do this. And
Absolutely.
I wish you the best in the work that you're doing, including book sales. Hopefully someone will hear this and go, oh, that book sounds really interesting. And no, the work that you're doing is important. So I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Okay,
We'll
well,
talk
have
to
a
you
great
soon.
day. Okay,
Bye.
take care. Bye-bye.
Good job. You look amazing. Oh, great. Oh, man, you're the best. Oh, wow, you look hot today. You would go,
You're like, I'm gonna go walk by that line again.
yeah, you would go, if that was my life and everywhere I went, that's what people said to me. You'd go, that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And yet that's not sustainable. That's not how life is. Just be bored. Just like, hey, brain, chill and do whatever you want to do in the background and recharge yourself. Our brains have plasticity and we can change. We can heal from this. We're not stuck in this, and this is not something that can't be fixed. Any of us at any time can change these behaviors and habits.
Yo, these kids sound cool, man. Like I think I need to get myself into like a park book club or something. Like
I have faith in the next generation. I believe they're going to lead the way in it and hopefully solve this. But it might be painful getting there.
oh, I'm sure it will be. It seems like everything we do is quite painful in one way or another, especially these
Exactly.
days. This is not the first time we've been through this, and it's not probably going to be the last. And we are capable of, and we have a good track record, fairly great track record of finding ways through it and making corrections and coming up with new technologies and new ways of interacting with them and with each other, and that we're gonna get through this.